So who wants to start?
You can go ahead.
Okay, so my book that I was assigned is Saint Unburied Saint by Jesmyn Ward, I think how it's pronounced. And the book, basically, it's a story of like this main character. He's a kid and he's biracial. He's half black, half white, but he's mostly, he's black.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is about him and his family. They go to this prison to pick up his dad and then come back. And it sounds simple, but it's actually a very heavy story because it like talks about racism in our country. And like, I think for example, is that the mother, she's black and she has a white friend, and even though they've done like the same stuff and like done like the same crimes, she's the one who gets punished for it. Meanwhile, her white friend basically goes off free. And another thing in the book that got kind of wild is that ghosts start to appear.
Oh?
Yeah, the family is very spiritual, not like religiously, but like spiritually, like in tune with the world. Like his grandmother is known for like being a really good healer and stuff like that. And she's also talked about family members having like the gift of like talking to spirits and stuff, which is like what the main character and his little sister has. They can see ghosts, basically. And one ghost that he sees throughout the trip to the prison is his grandfather's old friend who died when he was a teenager, when he was imprisoned. And basically what happened to him is his grandfather was in charge of the dogs. Like if someone escaped and he takes the dogs and you have to go out and get them. Well, what happened is that his friend, he saw one of the other inmates actually like raping one of the women inmates. And so when he saw that, the guy threatened to like, I don't know, like expose him for something and said, well, you're going to have to escape with me because I'm planning an escape because I don't want you ratting me out. So they go and they escape out of the prison yard. And of course it finds out, and like his grandfather has to like take the dogs and like go find him. But the rapist guy, he gets caught by these group of people and they start to like disembody him and like skin him alive.
Oh.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So when the grandfather finds the guy and he finds out that the other guy was like being skinned alive, he's like, oh, I'm gonna have to like mercy kill this guy. So he mercy kills him by like shanking him in the neck.
Oh.
And he dies. So basically his ghost is like trying to find out how he died. So he just travels with the main character, and when he like sees, and when he like asks his grandfather like, oh, how did so and so die? Then his grandfather explains the story, and like his ghost finds out, and he's like, oh, thank you, now I know how I died, because it was like very suddenly. But that was like one of the that was probably like the major racial thing that happened in the book. There's like a lot of others, and like when I was reading it, I was thinking like this is very out there, but then again it's like not, because this is actually like a reality for some people, especially like back then for Black America being like lynched. So yeah, there's a lot of others things. One of the other main things is that the mother is like a drug addict, and basically that's why her husband is in jail, is because he started dealing with meth after an accident happened. I forgot where he works. I think it was in a factory, and there was an accident, and like 11 to 15 people died, and it just like scarred him for life. So he started going into meth, and yeah. And basically his side of the family, because he's white, so his side of the family is extremely racist. They do not like want to see like his black wife or like his black children. In fact, when they do go and like see his family, because he got out of jail, so he has to see his family, his dad calls his wife a bitch N-word, and yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Cheerful.
So that's some of the stuff that happened in my book. It's very heavy.
Very different than mine.
Yes.
So mine is The Spark. I have physical copy.
Oh yeah, physical copies.
So The Spark was obviously nonfiction. It was, I guess it is exactly what it sounds like, a mother story of nurturing genius and autism. So her son's name is Jacob Barnett, and he is, I guess, what you would consider a child prodigy. Like like many kids with autism, he could be considered a savant, like someone with IQ that was off the scale. And at 12, he became a paid academic researcher. Like
Wow.
he could memorize, he could learn languages and complex musical pieces almost instantly by the time he was 9 years old. Like when he was 10 months old, he had memorized all his favorite shows in 3 different languages. Like,
Oh, wow.
he was going places quickly. And I mean, there was the time, normally when kids reach a certain age that have autism, they sort of retreat back within themselves because of autism and not being able to relate to other people very well. And so when he was about 14 months old, he retreated back into himself and was not as social as he has once been and never did any of the things that he loved anymore. So the whole story is sort of about his mom, whose name was Christine, who is sort of trying to fan the spark that she sees in her son, like the spark of genius and sort of invention, and how she sees that her son is special.
Yeah.
And so they sort of go through these struggles throughout the book. Like they're a low-income family. She's very sick with lupus syndrome, which is an autoimmune disorder. She has another son at one point who isn't doing well. And so she's trying to take care of her autistic son, deal with the new child that she has that is sickly, deal with her own problems, and also run a daycare center for other autistic kids. So it's sort of just this wild ride of her trying to balance all of these things in her life and also raise this son who is a genius but doesn't see himself as a genius. He sees himself as someone who has a problem, someone who's not like everyone else but in a bad way, and she's sort of trying to get him to see that he's special and that he's good.
Yeah.
So what did I say? Oh yeah, specifically in this book, I'm not sure if I would say that I liked it particularly. Like normally I'm someone who reads the fantasy genre, but that wasn't really the problem in this book. The way that I almost felt, the book was like obviously very uplifting because eventually whenever he does reach a certain age, I think I said it was like 12 or 13, he's getting, scholarship opportunities from all across the world and people wanting to like nominate him for the Nobel Prize, because when he was 9, he came up with his own unique physics theory.
Wow.
So like, obviously it's very uplifting, and the end is about how he found himself and like she successfully fanned the spark and he's a special child now. But overall, I feel like the ending was a little bit misleading. Like, obviously autism is something that there's not a cure for. It's something that you have to grow up with.
Exactly.
But in the end, despite the fact that it is really uplifting and cheerful and it all ended up happy and good, it almost feels like she's saying that you can cure autism by, like she says, autism is a thief and takes my child away, but I took him back. So she talks about him as if, it's very difficult to describe. What did I write down specifically? Like she specifically talks about how she took her son back from autism and that he became like everyone else. And that to me is a little bit misleading because he's never going to be like everyone else. And I understand treating him like he's everyone else, but she almost talks like it can be cured through nurturing.
I think autism gives him like a different perspective on the world, and that like really helped him become like a physicist, if that's right. And like discover all those theories. So, I don't know. I mean, it's true he's going to be different from everyone else because of like how his brain works, but that's okay. Man, my book is really different. It did not have a happy ending because it goes forward a few years, and the mom and dad, they're still meth addicts. They're like skin and bones, basically. And the grandma died because throughout the whole book, she has cancer, and she does die at one point in the story. But it has like a sort of positive note because the main character and his little sister, they can see ghosts, and there's basically ghosts in their house, and they can't like move on. But when his like little sister says, "Hey, you have to move on," and she sings the song, the ghosts are like, "Oh, okay, we'll move on eventually." And so that was like the happy note. But throughout the entire thing, I'm like, "Ugh, this is very heavy." But I'm like really glad I read it. And it's a fiction story. So I got one of the only 2 fiction stories, but I really enjoyed it. There's like more racial injustice that like happens. One that I found really wild that happens near the beginning of the book is the mother, because it switches perspectives between the mother and her son, who's the main character basically. And when she gets high off of meth, she sees her dead brother's ghost like haunting her basically. And I think it actually is like the real ghost, not just like a hallucination. And he only appears when she gets high because she's not being a great mother. But you get a flashback of how he died, and what happened is that he joined the football team and he was the only black player. And so it seemed like he was getting along with like all the other players, and they decided to go on a hunting trip. But what he decided to do instead is that instead of use a gun to hunt animals, he was going to use a bow and arrow. So he had his dad teach him how to use the bow and arrow and basically like kill and hunt all these animals like really well. And so when they went hunting, they decided to have a bet, like, oh, if I kill more animals with a bow and arrow, I bet I can kill more animals with this than you guys can with your guns. And he proved himself right, because he killed more animals using a bow and arrow. But the thing is that they got super angry about it, that one of them shot him and killed him.
Oh.
Yeah. And you found out that the guy who shot him is actually her husband's cousin. And I'm just like, oh my God.
This book goes so many different directions.
It goes so many different directions. And like, it does like try, like the mother, she tries to be a good parent, but I just don't think she can, because she's like such a heavy meth addict, and she like beats her daughter, who's like a toddler, by the way. She's probably 3 years old. And throughout the trip, the daughter, there's something wrong with her because she keeps vomiting, so there's something sick with her. And the mother like gives her Gatorade to make her feel better. And I'm just like, this is so messy. And like, basically the main character, who's like 12, he has to like literally step up and be like his sister's parent, which he shouldn't have to be. So he's like very mature for his age, is what I found out. But I think that's like very true for like a lot of kids who have like parents that are drug addicts, is that they have to mature early to take care of their younger siblings, and also how to take care of himself. And another like interesting feature is that he doesn't call his parents mom and dad. He calls his grandparents ma'am and pop. He calls his parents by their first names. So you can see that there's like a disconnection between them. He doesn't like really see them as a parents. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot of similarities between ours.
I think they're almost like polar opposites.
Yeah.
Like especially with the parenting in both books is really different. Obviously this one was more focused on the mother and her struggles than your book was, but it's still like she's a very good mother. Like they're low income and she's Amish. Not like horse and buggy Amish as she puts it, but like big city Amish. So like they don't use technology, but they still drive cars. So it's like they've sort of adapted, but she's still Amish, and it limits her ability to find jobs and bring income for her son. When compared to yours, where she was not a particularly good mother.
There's also a part where they stop at their attorney's place and they get high on meth. And when they're driving home, they have meth in the car, but the police come and like stop them. So the mother just takes all of it, and she gets violently high at some point. So the dad, he has to like really go to a convenience store, get milk and charcoal, and like break the charcoal and put it in the milk and make her drink it so she can vomit it back up. And it was a lot.
So obviously our books were more different than they were similar.
Yeah, I guess the similarities is that there's a mom in it.
There are family figures.
Yeah, and like I guess she tries to be a good mother. It's just I don't think she can. She just, and like there's a point where you can tell that she regrets having her son, because she's like, if I never had Jojo, who's the main character, me and my husband would be down in California, which I highly doubt. But yeah, you can see that she kind of regrets having kids.
So I think because our books have more differences,
Yeah.
we can talk more about the differences. Like, I think they can both really be linked really well to diversity. So, like,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
obviously yours was a lot of racial diversity, and mine was more, I guess, mental diversity is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And, like, not familial, but, like, mental state. I'm not quite sure how to put it. But, like, obviously he's autistic, which makes him different than everybody else in a good way, but
Yeah.
still different than everybody else, and sort of his struggles with that. So that's obviously how mine can be linked more to diversity. And I don't feel like the full aspect of what autism is incorporated in this book, because
Yeah.
for everyone it's not always a positive spark. Like, it's not always high IQ, good stature later in life,
Yeah.
like getting, like, I have a friend of mine who is severely autistic, and he has difficulties, like, completing basic tasks,
Yeah.
and he needs help always, and that's not really represented in this book. Not that it's bad. It's obviously a biography of someone who has, I guess, gotten the good side of it, for lack of a better term. It sounds really bad, but for lack of a better term. But it still does talk about it and links into diversity in that way.
Yeah, because when in high school there was a girl who was very, very high on the autism spectrum, and she actually needed an aide to do everything. So I think that, yeah, that should, like, definitely be represented more. Yeah. I think mine, it just basically goes heavy on the racial injustice. Like, it does not hold punches. It basically shows, like, this is what happens. Like, even if it seems, like, out there and unbelievable, it does happen. Like, I'm never going to experience it. My family is never going. Well, there were some parts, especially with the biracial parts, that did seem familiar to me, because my grandpa, he was half Native American, and he did grow up on a reservation. So he did experience, like, some racial injustice, and this is highlighted in the book. It's basically like, even though you could be half white, if you're, like, half something else, then you're basically not pure white, quote unquote. And this does go into it, because since the main character, he appears black, like, the white side of him is, like, never going to be considered at all, because, and I don't believe this, because he's quote unquote tainted by his blackness. And that's, like, definitely highlighted in the book, because his grandfather on his, like, dad's side, who's white, he doesn't want to see him at all.
Yeah.
Or, like, even acknowledge he exists. And, like, and, like, he does have a grandmother, but you can tell that she's very condescending, and, like, and she's, like, doing nothing to, like, stop her husband's racism at all. Yeah.
Like, even though your book is obviously fiction, like, there's
Yeah.
ghosts and talking to ghosts, fiction, it's very real
Yeah.
in the fiction that it is. So, like, I have a friend, she is not biracial, she is white, but she like, her mom was a drug addict. She had to grow up at a very young age and take care of her two younger
Yeah.
siblings. Like, her mom's now out of the picture, but, like, it was very similar to the way that you described the book. And, like, I guess I just didn't think about it all that much. Like, I didn't think about how common it might actually be.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing.
Especially, like, down lower class
Yeah.
America is much bigger reality, especially.
For sure.
Oh, this is what I forgot to mention. The prison they were going down to pick up their father from, it's called Parchment, and that's actually where his grandfather went. That's basically, like, where everyone goes when they're, like, convicted of a crime, is Parchment. And, like, his grandfather refused to go down there because he never wanted to see the place again. And also, since, like, his grandfather helped with, like, the prison dogs, he won't allow his family to, like, have any dogs in the house, because he just, like, doesn't want to associate with that part of his life anymore. It's, like, too hard to deal with.
And then obviously my book is mostly about a white family. So there's a difference there as well. Like, there's not a whole lot of racial, I guess, I forgot the word. diversity.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of racial diversity in this book, which, I mean, I didn't necessarily expect because it is an autobiography. It's following a mother and her son, so it's not necessarily focused on, like, integrating other races, but there was, whenever she was talking about, like, the places where they lived and the center that she runs for the daycare for autistic kids, there was almost no mention of, I guess, people of color or families of color.
Yeah.
So that is obviously a really big difference because mine is focused more on the family of, or a white family, and yours is focused more on a family that is, I guess,
well, mainly black.
biracial.
Biracial/black. But the white side of his family doesn't even talk to them at all.
Which is horrible.
Yeah, it's very bad.
So mine was more uplifting.
Mine not uplifting.
More cheerful.
I really like the ghost aspect. I thought that was cool when, like, the ghosts started to appear and, like, you could learn more about, like past injustices, especially with, like, that one kid who basically had to be mercy killed. It was very depressing.
A really hard book to read, probably.
Yeah,
Not hard in the fact that it's bad, but hard in the fact that it touches some really heavy subjects.
And, like, see how it's, like, formatted? Like, there's not a lot to read, so, like, everything that you, like, read is, like, heavy. It just keeps piling on and on.
Just no break. Just
No, there's no
constant.
break. It's just constant. All right, we have, like, 9 minutes.
Does it have to be exactly 30 minutes, or does it get to approximately 30?
I'll say around it.
Okay. Well, I mean, we made connections between diversity and our books. So, like, mine has diversity. Both of ours have, yours has more diversity in races. Mine has diversity in race and the fact that it wasn't really mentioned. So there was a lack of diversity of race in my book. But there was some social class diversity in both of ours, for sure. Like, she was Amish, which was a big thing. A big part of, like, her life and how she raised her son was sort of influenced by her Amish heritage and the way that she grew up. So there was that, and there was sort of the differences between her and the people around her who weren't necessarily Amish, so there was diversity there. There's not a whole lot of similarities between our books.
No, except that
mostly differences.
Except that there's a mom in both of them.
There's a mom in both of them. One of them's really bad. Wants to be good, but is bad. One of them is good.
Because both of these focus on very different aspects of diversity. Like, even though they could be connected somehow, because there's definitely, like, people of color who are autistic that could be addressed. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot else about what we can talk about. I mean, we've discussed sort of what the book was about, connections, diversity.
And there's, I guess for, like, digital diversity, there was none for me, because this was, like, a very low economic family. And even though I think it's, like, fairly recent, the timeline, because it takes place with, like, I would say roughly a week, but the period it takes in is, like, very recent. Because it's just basically just the only, like, technology I can think is the car that they were driving in.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot in mine either, just because she was Amish, so there was less technology represented. But the husband, whose name was Michael, he was not Amish, and so he brought some aspects of that into the household, so it was, but still not as diverse as you would expect.
Actually, I just found a connection. The husband's name is Michael.
The biggest connection. Both dads are named Michael.
Oh yeah, and the daughter, she's named after her father, which is Michaela. But the grandparents and also JoJo, they refuse to call her Michaela because the father, he's just like an addict, so they just call her Kayla instead of Michaela, because they don't want to, like, refer her to, like, her drug addict father's name, and, like, have her realize that she's named after him.
For sure.
Yeah. There's a connection. They're both named Michael.
Another similarity, there's 2 kids.
Oh yeah, there's 2 kids as well.
One of them in here is really young and really...
Are their grandparents?
Sick. No.
Oh no.
We've found the extent, familial connections between the books. That's about it.
I am glad I read this though, because I think it's, like, a major wake-up call, especially to, like, racial injustice. I can think, like, of another time it was, like, a really big wake-up call was when I was, like, 8, And my family and I, we went on a trip like down to Arizona, and we decided to like go down to Mexico. But the thing is, it was a border town. So when we went down there, there was like such a huge gap between the social economic class, and like there was kids selling stuff on the street. And I was like only 8 years old when I saw this. I was like, oh my God, this is like a completely new experience.
I experienced this last summer. I went down to Belize, which I don't know if you know where that is. It's technically part of the Caribbean. It's like Central America.
Okay, yeah.
And the social class difference was major, and obviously there is a large degree of Black population down there, which I didn't have a problem with. But it surprised me, like if you went to some of the border towns, like there was obviously the big tourist area, so like Belize City, where there's towering skyscrapers and hotels, but if you went to the border towns, there would be mothers and kids just sort of like sitting out on a boardwalk under a tent, and that's where they live. Yeah. And just places that looked like they were not inhabitable, and trash everywhere, and like it was a mess, and it was sort of a wake-up call to experience it directly. Yeah.
Well, I think on a last note, I'll say I enjoyed my book, and I like how his grandparents stepped up and took care of him, because his grandpa taught him all type of stuff, because they have farm animals and they use them to like make food, and like his grandfather told him like, oh, this is how you slaughter an animal and how you make food and stuff like that. And like his grandmother taught him about sex, and you know, they did like all the parently stuff they did for their kid, because like his mom couldn't do it, and his dad is obviously absent because he was in prison. So there was like that positive note in the book, but the rest is very deep and heavy. But I'm glad I read it. It was a nice and easy read. Well, easy because of how it's formatted, not because of like the subject.
Overall, I think I did enjoy mine too. Like there were some, like I guess with most books, there were some things that I thought could have been different. Like I know that his life is obviously really important, and it was a really enlightening story to read. Like I thoroughly enjoyed essentially watching Jacob grow up. Yeah. And go through all of his struggles, but it also made me think a lot about how not all autistic kids are like that, and it would have. So I guess it was also sort of sad in that regard. So like it was a happy story, but then when you thought about it more, it was sad because not all autistic kids can have the spark.
Or like get that lucky. Especially if there's like a social economic difference. It's like a lot of like lower income autistic kids can't get that type of like treatment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, overall I did enjoy it.
That's good. All right, that was a good discussion.
Yes.